and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm supremely pumped to be here with you. And I have someone with me who's part man, part synthesizer, Paul Bindig. How things, mate?
Things are going great. And look, after my latest little service and getting the dust out from all my key contacts, I'm ready to go
Ready to
and
go.
chat to our next guest.
Yes, no, look, we're very excited to have David Rosenthal on the show, and this is actually part one of two parts. So, we spent a significant period of time with David, who a lot of people will already know is the keyboard player with Billy Joel, but has had a massive career outside of even that. I'd be happy just being Billy Joel's keyboard player for nearly 30 years, but that's far from the only string to David's bow. So as you'll hear in this first part, we talked to David about, Billy Joel's amazing run of shows at Madison Square Garden and a lot of parts of his career. And we'll catch up with you after this end of part one. David, welcome. Can't thank you enough for joining us. And I'm going to hit you with a question right up front. We were just talking before the show, and you've managed to become a great musician that's also now a morning person. How the hell did you do it?
That's an interesting leading question. I don't know how it happened. Through COVID and all the time spent at home, and I used to just be up all night, work all night. My company's called Nocturnal Productions, but also I think some house construction projects where the contractors only want to work at 7 a.m. and you have to be sharp when they arrive. So a combination of things, and much to my surprise, one day I woke up and I said, "Wait a minute, I'm a morning person now. This is weird." But I actually am very productive now in the mornings, and I just had to adjust my thinking a little bit because the most important thing for anybody is when you can be most creative and most productive. And so for me, it used to be the night and now it's the morning, but whatever it is.
I'm very, very jealous. Again, great to have you here, David. And so let's talk about just to kick off 2022. Is it damn good to get back to some form of normalcy? And I'm not claiming that COVID's over because it's not by any means, but does it feel like you're getting back to some sort of normal life with your live work?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I would say some sort of normal is a good way to put it, actually, because it's not quite normal, but it sure is a whole lot better than it was during the pandemic. Some might argue the pandemic is still going, but and that may be true. But I guess during the isolation period would be a better way to put it. That was a long haul, and I think everybody missed live concerts. So we missed doing it. The fans missed going. We've been doing shows for about a year now. 2 a month is what we do with the Billy Joel schedule. And it's been going good. I mean, all the shows, actually, we just completed makeup shows. So now finally we're back into new shows that were actually added after the pandemic, because we had all these shows at Madison Square Garden, some that have been postponed 2 and 3 times because in the middle of the pandemic, nobody knew how long it would go for. So we just kind of kept postponing it, hoping for the best. And but we finally got all the makeup shows in, and it's really great to be back doing it again. There's still a few restrictions in place. We have no backstage access for anybody, not even spouses, and that's due to COVID. And hopefully that'll get lifted at some point. And every show that we get done with everybody being healthy is a gift. And we love doing it. We love doing the shows. It's so much fun. But I think we all learned during the pandemic how fragile things can be, and so we're all very aware of that and grateful for every time we do get to perform.
Great. So let's talk about those shows for a second, David. So last weekend, I think it was the 82nd consecutive show, as you just mentioned, with a little bit of an interruption with COVID. So a couple of questions on that. The first obvious one is, how the hell do you keep it fresh?
Well, Billy's all about spontaneity, and we change up the set list. He'll throw stuff in that we haven't really rehearsed. We kind of go for stuff. It's really very much, every show comes out different, and we mix it up, and we're always on our toes. Things change from show to show. It's not a carbon copy show every time you go. And of course, the audience wants to hear the big hits, but he's got enough hits to fill 2 complete shows. So we try to mix it up. We have the staples that we always, do in each show, but we also play some obscure stuff and some album tracks, and we're mixing it up. And we have special guests from time to time, always unannounced. And sometimes we don't even know until, an hour before the show. So it's really a whole lot of fun. Every show is fun because every show is unique. And we go up there, since we only get to play every 2 weeks, we hit the stage sort of like uncaged animals each time, dying to get out there and play and do it. And we don't really rehearse. We just do a sound check and go each time. So that kind of keeps an edge on the whole thing as well, which it's just a lot of fun. It never gets old.
I read, David, that for yourself and for the guys in the band, you have to sort of keep in your head something like 80 to 90 different potential Billy Joel tracks that might come up at any one given point in time. How do you manage that particularly from a keyboard player's perspective? I imagine there's different patches you have to have programmed into your rig and that sort of thing and be ready to go, or is it just that you've prepared so well that that's not really a daunting challenge for you?
Well, it's all of the things are true, and it's always a challenge. I think I have 86, 87 songs programmed. Every song has its own setup, and I have to have the sounds ready to go for each one of them. He could call any song of those, and we could play it, and I have to be able to recall it instantly, bring up the sounds and be ready to go with it and remember it. Not only remember it musically, but remember how I mapped out the parts on my keyboards. Is the verse over here? Is this there? And so I think some of it are some of them are songs that I've been playing now for 29 years with Billy, so I kind of almost have the chords down to Piano Man, but no, kidding. No, it's so some of it is very in my blood, but some of the more obscure ones, he could call them up. And I think it comes down to doing the proper prep when I first learned them. And really, when I learn a song, I really learn it. It's not like I kind of got it. It's not that. No, I have this in my sleep, and I have to do it. Remember it not only from, as I said, musically, but how I map out the patches. So I have to practice that, and so until it becomes muscle memory, so that when we do call something that we haven't played in years, it'll either come right back to me in real time, or maybe with one pass, one run through or something.
Sure.
Sometimes, which has to be done in my head if we don't get to actually practice it. So so.
Yeah, and further down the line of prep and the way you guys perform, I believe in your most recent, one of your most recent shows, you popped a couple of covers in. You mentioned yourself it's about spontaneity and keeping things fresh and fun, and believe you may have done Dancing in the Street and also Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. How much notice is the band getting for that? How do you approach those covers? Is it let's do it exactly like the original, or do our own take on it? How do you do that?
So, two different scenarios there that you just mentioned. I'll address both of them. So,
please,
we do Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin in the at the ending of You May Be Right, and I don't know how it happened the first time, but it was an accident. We were just kind of jamming, and we just started. We're doing the tag of You May Be Right, and all of a sudden, I don't remember even how it happened the first time, but we just started playing Rock and Roll, and then we found a way to go back to and finish You May Be Right. So we go to Rock and Roll, and we came back, and it didn't happen perfectly this first time. But and then we were like, that was kind of cool. And the next sound check, Billy goes, let's try that again tonight and see what happens. Not let's rehearse it. Let's try it at the show and see what happens. So we did that. And over the course of a few times doing it, we kind of came up with this arrangement where we go and we actually do a verse and a chorus of it, and then come back to You May Be Right. So we do that the same way all the time. We've been doing that way probably for about 2-3 years. It's kind of part of, it's the way we do that song now, but it happened by accident initially. And out of just a spontaneous moment. The other song, Dancing in the Streets, we've been doing that for, I don't know, about the last 5-6 months. In the middle of River of Dreams, the song sort of naturally comes to a stop. And each time, before he says, in the middle of the night, it comes back in. First time, it's a couple of beats. The second time, it's a bar. And then the third time is like 2 bars on the record. But live, when we come to the last stop, we just stop for an indefinite period of time, and we have no idea what Billy's going to do. And sometimes Billy doesn't know what Billy's going to do. He just reads the crowd and he'll just start playing something. He'll ad lib and he'll come up with, and then we just launch into whatever he starts playing, and we'll do like a little bit of it, verse, chorus, or whatever, find a way to stop. And then we go back into River of Dreams. So that kind of was an evolving thing. And, but we sort of over the last few years found about 4 or 5 different songs that actually work in that spot, that we can go to that and then come back to River of Dreams. And so Dancing in the Street is the one we've been doing for the last 5-6 shows. And there have been others. And a lot of times we'll do a tribute to another band or another artist, or, something that's timely. So anything can happen in that moment of the show.
That's great. And I suppose that's definitely one way of keeping it fresh over even just a Madison Square Garden. So across those 82 shows, David, are there any particular memorable moments or particular shows that have stood out for you as being really special?
There's been a lot of them. I couldn't pick just one, but what comes to mind, I think, when we had the so the 82 shows is the consecutive shows in this run, but he's also at 128 lifetime or something like that, which is also a record. So every show that we do sets 2 new records. And out of those 128, I've done 108 of them with Billy, and played there 2 other times. So I've actually played at the Garden now 110 times, which is like surreal to even think about. It's really really strange. But kind of a pinch yourself moment every time. I never take it for granted. But anyway, to get back to your question. So when we had the 100th lifetime show, it was a pretty big deal. And so our special guest that night, unannounced, was Bruce Springsteen. And he came up and did 10th Avenue Freeze Out with us, and then Born to Run. And I really think the place went ballistic because, again, it's unannounced. All of a sudden, Billy just says, please welcome Bruce Springsteen, and all the place goes ballistic. We do 10th Avenue Freeze Out, and the place went crazy. But then when we started Born to Run, I think the place levitated. It's just like it's the response was just amazing. I'm getting chills telling you about it. And so yeah, that was a big, very memorable moment. Some other ones. So I think some of the special guest moments that we've had, Tony Bennett came up and did New York State of Mind with us. That was magical. We've had so many great guests. I wouldn't want to leave anybody out. But Bryan Adams was a great moment. We did Summer of '69 with him. And that was a very spontaneous thing that happened too, because Bryan emailed Billy and said, "Hey, I'm in New York. I was thinking maybe I'll come to your show tonight. This is maybe 5:30 p.m." And Billy said, "Great, want to do a song?" So he said, "Well, I don't know. We don't have any time to rehearse." And Billy's like, "My band is great. We'll know it." And so he lets me know this is happening, that it might happen. We race to the stage because we're all done with sound check. And at Madison Square Garden, they have a dark stage because of very strict union rules from 6 to 7:30. So we look at the watch. It's 20 to 6. We got 20 minutes. We're running to the stage. And everybody real quickly is listening to Summer of '69. We just listened to it really quickly. We run it a couple of times, not with Bryan because he wasn't there, just so we kind of had a feel for it. And then Bryan gets there about 15 minutes before the show. And he comes into our dressing room and he says, Billy's there. We're all dressed to go on stage and everything. And so Billy's like, "So what do you think?" And he's like, "Well, we didn't have a chance to rehearse. We didn't have a sound check." And Billy's like, "We got it. We got this. Come on up and do it, man. It'll be great." And Bryan was like, "Well, pencil it in and let me see how I feel during the show." And we said, okay. So we put it into the set and in the encore so he could see. And I guess during the course of the set, he felt comfortable enough that the band would be able to nail it. And so he came up and he did it with us, with having not played it with him ever. And of course, again, unannounced. And Billy welcomes him to the stage, and the place goes great, goes crazy. And we played Summer of '69. It came off great. He sang it fantastic. And it was that was a lot of fun. So that was memorable as well.
And that's amazing on a few levels. But I just want to shout out to our listeners, because I hear this quite a bit. No band's ever too good to play Summer of '69, right? It's considered such an overplayed song now in some bands. I know I've been in bands where they refuse to play it. It just shows you're never too good to play Summer of '69. Is a great song.
Oh, it really is. But of course, getting to play it with Bryan Adams is
Oh,
and with
absolutely.
Billy Joel at the same time makes it special. Oh, I forgot another one of the great moments. This was not at the Garden, but when we played at Shea Stadium, and Paul McCartney came up and joined us, and that was, talk about pinch yourself moments. I got to play with a Beatle at Shea, and so that was really
Yeah,
kind of
that's incredibly special. And just we will get on to Springsteen a little bit later, or East Street a little bit later, David. But just prior to Billy's amazing run at Madison Square Garden, was it Springsteen that had the rock record there as far as the comeback tour? I know it was only 10 or 11 shows, but would he have held the record prior to Billy as far as
No,
consecutive
actually,
shows?
actually, the record prior to Billy's was Billy's. We
Oh, there
broke
you
our own
go.
record. Yeah. So
There
so
you go.
in 2006, we did 12 nights consecutive. In one run. They weren't back to back nights, but
No.
in one run, 12 sellouts, and that was the record. And there's a live album from that called 12 Gardens Live that was recorded during that. And that was the record. But at that time, Elton John held the lifetime record, which was, I don't remember the exact number. It might have been 64, something like that. And so we passed that fairly early on in this run, and that was a big deal when we passed that. And since then, Billy's held the lifetime record, and I think Fish sold 13 nights, which broke Billy's previous record, but we were already at like 50 or something like that on this run. So they had a solid second place. But now I think don't quote me on this, but I think Harry Styles might have just recently done more than that at the Garden, like in this last month or two. Yeah, it's all, this is all surreal conversation. I mean, it's crazy. I got to play at the Garden when I was 21, my first time with Rainbow, and I felt lucky I had a chance to do it ever.
So, David, speaking of huge shows, it doesn't quite compare, but you're going to be down in Australia later this year just for one show only, on the 10th of December at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. So that's huge, and it's already sold out. What's on your tourist checklist while you're here? Or is it a super quick visit? Are you sort of in and out?
Well, yeah, I think we'll be there. I don't know. It's just the one show. It is a big show, though. It's a really big deal. It's completely sold out at the Melbourne Cricket Ground. We're doing Auckland the week before that, so we'll be going down there first and then heading over to Melbourne. I love Melbourne. It's a great city, and Sydney is one of my favorite cities in the whole world too. I don't know that I'll get to see it on this trip, but I've been many times down under, and I'm looking forward to it again. Crowds are great there, and it's always a fun trip.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said, sold, that'd be a huge show. And so just probably not the final Billy Joel question, but one of the final ones. So as you mentioned yourself, 29 years, 30 years next year of playing with Billy, what do you think stood you in the best stead to pull off that 30-year stint? Why is the relationship so effective?
Well, I don't know that when I first joined that I would have been able to tell you I'd be here 30 years later, but it's just, we have a great rapport. We work well together. I know, obviously very familiar with his music, and we have a great working relationship. I get him, and he's a great guy to work for. And I love his music. I genuinely love his music. I just never get tired of it. And of course, a big part of that is the way the crowds respond to his music. I've been fortunate to play with many different artists, and you always get an enthusiastic crowd when they come to see their favorite band or whatever the station is. But there's something about Billy's music that lights up people's faces in a way that I've never seen before. And that, that feeling, it never goes away, and it never gets old. So it might be a simple song that I'm playing. My parts may not be complicated or challenging, but that's irrelevant, because it's just so much fun to play those songs and feel the audience, how they respond to it. So I don't never think of things in terms of, oh, this is more difficult, that's less difficult, this is an easy song, that's a hard song. I don't really think that way at all. It's all about how best to pull off any song such that the audience gets what they came for, and that's to, as it says in the lyrics to Piano Man, to forget about life for a while, which everybody always cheers on that line when we play it every night, especially now after the pandemic, because that's why people go to shows. They go there to just forget about life for a while. That line speaks so much.
And just does it speak a lot, particularly at Madison Square Garden in New York? And I'm asking this in context of knowing that you were pivotal in organisation of some of the post 9/11 fundraising televised. And I still remember one of those televised shows had a huge impact on me, even at the time down here in Australia. Do you think there's still that real, it resonates so strongly because of New York?
Yeah, I think that certainly helps. I mean, New York is home field advantage for us, kind of. Billy is very much a New Yorker. I mean, he's huge all over the world, everywhere. He's one of the biggest solo artists of all time. There's no question about that. But New York and seeing Billy Joel in New York is a thing. You know, it's become a tourist destination almost. You know, because we're there every month, and there's something magical about the crowd, and there's some. I think there's just a way that the New Yorkers connect to his lyrics and his music as a New Yorker himself, and there's sort of that connection. But so I think New York is sort of the center of that universe, and Madison Square Garden is the center of the New York universe. But nonetheless, when we go and we play stadiums elsewhere, and we go around the world, and we do, which we haven't been doing as frequently as we used to, but the response from the crowd still, even though he hasn't put out a new record since 1993, the response from the crowd is just it's amazing. It's just amazing.
Yeah, he's enduringly popular here in Australia too. He's as you
Same,
well know.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Obviously, well, we're going to see you again down here, which is fantastic. Speaking of records, David, and endurance, I have to ask you about this. I believe it's a Guinness World Record that you have 56 shows, 56 nights in 56 cities consecutively with Robert Palmer. I can't even begin to imagine that. I'm curious. A, is that something that you would do again? And B, what do you remember from that blur of shows? Does it stand out, or is it just like a whirlwind? Did you sleep? We want to know what happened.
Well, the operative word there in your question is blur. That's really what it became. You know, after about 2 weeks of that, we're all zombies. You know, and we played the show fine. You know, we were all professionals and we played it well. But in my opinion, it kind of loses a spark after a while, even though you don't make any mistakes. It's just we're all literally zombies at that point. Now, this was done. We did this because it was what Robert wanted to do. Robert hated days off, and contradictory to any other singer on the planet, he said if he stopped singing for a day, he was afraid he would lose his voice. Wow. And he said he was fine. He could sing every day of his life as long as he sleeps 8 hours. He'd be fine. But this was really extreme, and so really, you know, the routine was, you know, get to sound check. He would do a long sound check every day. We would run a whole bunch of songs, and then go, you know, sit in the dressing room for a little bit, have something to eat, do the show, get on the bus, and then he would listen to the whole show on the bus. In those days, we had cassettes, and he would have the front of house tape, and he would want to listen to the whole show again after doing it so many times in a row, and he would crank it up in the front of the bus, and all of us were crammed into the back of the bus trying to, like, I don't want to hear it again, you know, we love you, Robert, but we can't listen to the show again. And but he would listen to it every night, and we would fall asleep on the bus, do an overnight, get to the next city at like 5, 6 in the morning, stumble out of the bus, go and check into the hotel, go back to sleep, and then wake up, take a shower, and just do it again. And then that was what it was. And that was actually the first leg of the tour only. The second leg was 55 shows in 57 days. And the only reason we had 2 days off was because it was 16-hour bus rides. So it was, yeah. So when I finished that tour, I actually made a conscious decision that I was never going to tour again, because I was like, I can't deal with this. This has been fun, but it's enough. So I actually didn't tour for like 5 years, and I was doing studio work. That's when I did the Red Dawn album, and did a lot of different projects. That's when I worked on Passion and Warfare with Steve Vai, and the Whitesnake Slip of the Tongue album, and I did a whole bunch of R&B albums. Did a lot of studio work, and then which culminated in doing my own album with Red Dawn. But then when the Billy Joel opportunity came up, I thought, well, maybe this might be something I'll go back on the road again, because of course his way of touring was much more civilized, and you know. Even back then we would do 2 on 1 off, 3 on 1 off. It was very civilized, and multiple nights in each city a lot of times, so it wasn't travel every day, and that's continuously slowed down to what it is now, only 2 shows a month. So I think this has been the great equalizer to those Robert Palmer days.
Yeah, it sounds like a much more easy to deal with pace. I mean, I'm only 55 shows in 57 days. It's lazy, I think. I don't know.
Yeah,
mate.
I have to tell one funny story from that too, because we were on the Pacific Rim leg of that, as you guys know, in Australia, and we went to Philippines. We played in Bangkok. We played in Japan, and that whole region. It's physically impossible to play every night, simply because of the distances you had to travel. So every day was either a gig or travel. But we did actually play in Guam, a show, and then took a 2 a.m. flight after the show overnight with the gear and everything, landed the previous morning in Hawaii, because we flew over the dateline, and did a show again on the same night.
That is excellent. Time traveling as well as gigging. Brilliant stuff. David, we've loved the previous rig tours that you've done, that we can see on social media. We'll link to those in the show, but we'd love if you can, just a brief overview of your current rig and anything that might have changed in the past year or two.
In the past year or two, not really much. During the pandemic, I took the opportunity of downtime, and I had my gear home, which I very rarely do. My gear, my touring rig lives in a truck basically, and I see it at sound check, and I make sure everything's working, and then I do a gig, and that's it. Yeah. So I have, as you guys might know, I have an A and a B rig that both run in real time instead. But I also at home I have a C rig, which is an identical one, so that if I need to do programming, I never have time to do it on a gig day. So like if we have a guest artist, or I know in advance Billy wants to try something we've never done, or any number of things, I can do the programming here, put the patch on a flash drive, and then at sound check I just transfer it to that stuff there. So that's been an important part of it. But because my gear lives in a truck all the time, once I get everything debugged and working well, I have to freeze the systems. Even if this latest, greatest, newest version of Mainstage is awesome and this plugin comes out, can't do it, because I can't experiment in a system that I don't have a chance to test it out. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was still on Yosemite on my main stage rigs, because that system was stable, and it had been frozen for literally 5 years. So I thought during the pandemic, well, I have enough time to really make a change here. So I leapfrogged over like 5 OSs and switched everything up to Catalina. So that was a big job, because it was a lot of upgrades and testing of plugins and stuff like that. And also, as the pandemic was looking like we were going to get back to touring, it had been a year and a half since we had played. Excuse me. So Billy agreed to actually do a week of rehearsals, which is very unusual for him. He hates rehearsals. But I said, we really need to just run all the stuff once or twice. And so we did that. So we had a week, and he even came the last 2 days, which surprised everybody. But knowing that I was going to have that time to crash and burn, I thought I'm going to upgrade the systems now. So now everything is stable, and with Catalina and everything is fine. But I had that time period. So that's really the only change that I've made. Because of that, I added a bunch of new plugins that were not available in back in when I put the Yosemite system together. So I have that at my disposal now, which is really nice to give me some new tones to to go for if we do new songs. But if we're doing the old stuff, that stuff's all pre-programmed already anyway. So
yeah, that's good. And I mean, I think some people know, but others may not, that a huge part of your career has been doing really in-depth synth programming and rig design for other artists. And as a tragic Springsteen and Billy Joel fan, I mean, let's talk even just the stuff you've done for E Street, but just more broadly, what has kept you passionate about that? Because it is a real skill, but it also can be an incredibly frustrating process. You know, using maybe the E Street rig as an example, how have you kept that an interesting part of your career?
I just, I'm a techno nerd inside, and I love technology. I've been into synth since I was like 15, and I just, it's a full-time job keeping up with technology, as you guys know, and I just love all of the new innovations that keep coming out over the years. My first tour with Rainbow was pre-MIDI, and it was pre-patch memories, and I only had one polyphonic synth, actually the OBXA, which was the first one that I owned that had patch memories and could play chords. Wow, these were big breakthroughs at the time, and yet who knew then that MIDI was still to come, which changed everything. And then so I embraced that. And after Rainbow Days, with the Cyndi Lauper tours, was the first time I went on the road and started using dedicated controllers and modules and having a MIDI system that patches could be recalled at the touch of a button, and samplers came in and changed everything again. And then all these new synths kept coming out with all these new technologies, the DX7, the D550, the D50, the Roland JD800, and all these groundbreaking synths with sounds that no one had ever heard before. All the while, samplers keep improving and getting better and better. And then just when you think there was nothing new to come along, then all of a sudden we have plugins, and which was a complete game changer. And now all of a sudden you don't have to carry around truckloads of gear to get all those sounds, and it can all be ported over. But the interesting thing is, through all of these technological developments, it's all the same stuff inside, under the hood. Signal flow is signal flow. Once you understand signal flow and you understand how synthesis works, it all just kind of keeps getting repackaged. So, when you have a plugin, even though it looks different and it functions different, underneath what you don't see is all the same stuff. So you really can apply all of these knowledges to the new technologies as they come along. And I've always just been one of those guys that goes, well, now this is available and that's available. Now I could do this and I can do that, and then I find ways to turn it into a keyboard rig, which my goal with a keyboard rig has always been to make it a musical instrument, not just a pile of gear. So I find ways to make all of these systems function and integrate to get them together to make it, because the ultimate goal, obviously, no matter how technical we all want to geek out on, the ultimate goal is making music, excuse me. So that's what we want, and to create better and more fun ways to perform. That's the end goal always, but there's the technology keeps changing along the way, such that there are new and exciting ways to be able to accomplish that and do more with it.
And so, I mean, I assume you have to take into account players' personalities and their own level of familiarity with technology. So again, using E Street as example, Roy Bittan and Charlie Giordano, I'm sure have got totally different experiences with their instruments and their approach. How much do you have to factor that into your design?
Well, in a situation like that, where I'm brought in to redesign both their keyboard rigs and do all the programming, it's not about me as a performer. It's about them. They're the performer. Now, I have an insight into what it's like to be them, because I know what it's like to be in their shoes. But here I am thinking, okay, well, Roy is this type of a player, and he likes this, and he likes this that way. What's he going to want when he's on stage and he's only thinking about music during the show? How is he going to want his rig to operate? And which is different than Charlie. So I had to take all that into consideration. But really, the goal, in addition to creating new rigs for them, the goal was to bring all of these dinosaur keyboards and modules that they had been dragging around for years and years, even decades, and bring it into the new world and condense it to be able to use main stage and so on and so forth. Bruce is very exacting in what he wants, and when he hears a certain sound, he wants it exactly that same way, and he knows right away if something's different. And so he wants it to be replicated exactly. So that was part of the challenge of that, was bringing stuff and porting it into the computer world. Some were able to be done with, some of the patches were able to be ported into plugins and imported, actually. Some via sysx, some via, replicating all the parameters. And others, I had to just multi-sample it, which, now with the advent of auto sampler, you can really replicate something, and you do it with 16 velocities per voice, and you do every note if you have to, or every third if you can get away with it. But if need be, every single note, 16 velocities or whatever. And at the end of it, if you make your samples long enough, it's really sounds the same, and then I go back and I A/B it. So that was the challenge, was how to get rid of all that stuff. And so that they didn't have to carry it around anymore. The second part of that challenge was that I had to do it while they were rehearsing. So this was really tricky because Bruce comes in and he'll rehearse 4 or 5 hours. To him, a rehearsal is a show that he runs through lots and lots and lots of songs. And he doesn't want to know that something's not working. So there was no such thing as being in between rigs, So basically what I had to do is I had to keep the old system working, and I split the MIDI from all of the controller keyboards that they were using and ran it into what was the new system, what was going to be the new system. And after rehearsal each day, when they stopped, is when I went into heavy programming mode with his techs and some people that I brought in as well. And then we would program, and okay, I got 10 more sounds done today, and then tomorrow after rehearsal I'm going to do 10 more sounds, and little by little I systematically went through until all of the sounds were in the new system. And then I would be listening. They were still, Roy and Charlie were still listening to the old system, and was Bruce in front of house. But I was under the stage in headphones listening to them play each of the new sounds and go, okay, that one's not quite right yet. I got to tweak that, until I got it to a point where I actually took a deep breath and switched from one system to the other, and they didn't know.
That's
so
right.
that was like, wow, it worked. Everything worked. And I said to Roy after the rehearsal, I said, you played the new system today? He goes, really? And I said, yeah, you went on that. I said, I did it because I felt confident. All the sounds were there and everything was working and it's all debugged. And I had, with a touch of a button, I could have gone back to the old system at any moment if there was a problem. But we went through the whole rehearsal and you played the new system. He couldn't believe it. And Charlie said the same thing. And so then I continued. Now, they didn't have 100% faith in it. And so they chose to take the old stuff with them on that tour. But after a few weeks of that and the shows, and, I went to the first couple of weeks of shows, made sure everything was working. And then eventually they packed up the old stuff and that was it. So it was quite a challenge to do that seamlessly.
And just even pure volume of songs. I know there's a lot of piano and organ on Bruce's work, but he's got over 450 songs or something. So you must have had to have done, 60 or 70 or at least 80 different sounds.
At least I honestly, I didn't count them, but I think there was well over 100 songs that had to be ready. Now, some of the songs use the same sounds, especially, Roy's on piano and he has, a bunch of different patches, and Charlie has a lot of different glocks and accordions and all different types of things. Some of them were variations on other sounds. And then there was the whole new album of sounds that was on the Wrecking Ball tour. So there was all those new sounds that had to be integrated in. But fortunately, a lot of those had been done with modern equipment, so they were actually easier to replicate. But yeah, every song has its own set of challenge, and you just go down this giant checklist of, okay, I got this song. This song needs, these 8 or 9 sounds or whatever, and this next song is going to need these 4 sounds and whatever. I make giant spreadsheets and I make a progress checklist so that I make sure I don't miss anything, and I just go back, and when I'm done, I have this huge spreadsheet with all these check marks all over it. And but it's the only way to stay organized on a project of that magnitude.
So there we have part 1. We'll obviously talk about the interview as a whole at the end of part 2, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out before we go to our gold and silver supporters. So that's the Chord Chrome User Group. Big shout out to you, Greg. They're on Facebook. So search on Facebook for the Chord Chrome User Group. Brother Paul Brown from the Water Boys. Thank you, sir, for your ongoing support. Tammy Catcher, the brilliant Tammy Catcher of Tammy's Musical Stew, for her support. And the musicplayer.com forums also. We would be lost without them. So thank you all for your support. So yeah, we'll be back again probably in a week or so for part 2, but just a reminder that you can keep in touch via a few means, via www.keyboardchronicles.com, on Facebook at the Keyboard Chronicles, on Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1. We are also on Instagram, and I wish I could remember my Instagram tag, but if you search for the Keyboard Chronicles, it'll come up. And if you'd like good old-fashioned email, then drop us a line at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. Finally, if you'd like to become an official Patreon supporter, we do hugely appreciate it. And for the price of a coffee a month, you can help us go from strength to strength. So that's patreon.com/ just for something different, Keyboard Chronicles. And also check out the merchandise page on our website, where we've just uploaded a whole bunch of really cool digital art related to keyboard synths, a lot of abstract stuff, and buying that helps keep this little boat afloat. Paul, thank you for getting through part 1 here with me.
Oh, what a pleasure it was. So much fun. And I'm very excited for part 2.
Yeah.
Da, da, da.